Good morning to everyone. Let's discuss about Chaucer to Tottel'S Miscellany. The 15th century. The 15th century is called a barren period in its history after the death of Chaucer. It is to be noted that in England there was no great man in any of the field in the 15th century. There were no favorable conditions for creative literature. Religion continued to degenerate and persecution was employed to stamp out all efforts towards reform. There was a political struggle between the houses of York and Lancaster, and this resulted in the Wars of the Roses. In these Wars of the Roses, many noblemen were killed and feudalism was severely shaken at its foundations. Also, the low state of education emphasized. Universities wasted in endless and profitless controversies over medieval philosophy. The medieval class people were not interested in intellectual aspects, so there was no literary genius in the 15th century. Poetry of the 15th century. In the 15th century, most of the poets tried to follow Chaucer. The Flower and the Leaf is a beautiful long poem ascribed to Chaucer himself, but now it was referred to some anonymous writer of his school. Among the numerous Chaucerians, the best known British poets are Thomas Occleve and John Ligget. The Governale of Princes, it was a long poem written by Thomas Occleve in which he describes his grief on Chaucer's death and also sings his master's praises. Then Mother of God. It is one of his minor poems which was printed with Chaucer's own works. Then John Ligget wrote the story of Thebes. It was designed as a new Canterbury Tales. Also the Troy Bake and the Falls of Princes. Then the Scottish poetry. The influence of Chaucer was marked in the best poetry of the 15th century in Scotland. The King's Squire. It is a long poem written by James I of Scotland in which he tells about his love for the Lady Jane Beaufort. She was the daughter of the Duke of Somerset. She later became his wife. Then the next poet is William Dunbar. He wrote a poem, The Thistle and the Rose. It's about the marriage of James IV of Scotland and Margaret. Margaret is the daughter of Henry VII of England. He also wrote Dance of the Seven Deadly Sins, which is about the character of the poet and his native soil. The next poet is Robert Henryson. He wrote the Testament of Cresside, and Robin and Maid is a story which anticipates Burns Duncan Gray. Then the next one is Gavin Douglas. He wrote Palace of Honor and also translated Virgin's Aeneid to English. It is remarkable to say that all these poets followed Chaucerian model. Then ballads of the 15th century. The 15th century is rich in ballads, which is a particular kind of minor verse. Some of the poems such as the Battle of Otterburn, the Nut Brown Maid and Robin Hood ballads are notable. They were rude in style, wonderfully direct and vigorous and full of a real feeling. So these ballads fostered a love of poetry among the English people. The prose of the 15th century. The prose of the 15th century was better than that of poetry. Prose was used for the purpose of instruction and entertainment. Some of the prose writers are listed here. The first one is Reginald Peacock. He took an active part in the religious controversies, satisfying either the Lollards or the Orthodox churchmen, and made a bold break with a tradition which John Wycliffe failed to shake. His works, Repressor of Overmuch Blaming of the Clergy and Book of Faith, were mentioned as landmarks in the history of English prose. The next one is Sir John Fortescue. He wrote the prose, The Difference Between an Absolute and a Limited Monarchy. Then William Caxton. He wrote Dicks or Sayings of the Philosopher And he's the first Englishman learned to use the printing press and is the first one who printed book in English. So he is the first one who learned to use the printing press and the first one who printed book in English. Among all these prose works, Morte d'Arthur is the most popular work. It was written by Sir Thomas Malory. It is a compilation of a number of French romances dealing with King Arthur and his round table knights. This Morte d'Arthur inspired many great modern poets such as Matthew Arnold, Swinburne, William Morris and Tennyson. Tennyson's Idylls of the King is based upon this Morte d'Arthur. Then the revival of learning. The age of Chaucer marked the dawn of new learning. The pioneers of this great revival were the two Italian writers, Petrarch and Boccaccio, in the 14th century. But in the 15th century, only the great age of Italian humanism entered. This revival of learning worked in two ways. It did much to emancipate thought from the bondage of medieval theology, and it presented writers with literary masterpieces as models. For these two reasons, England began to get the influence of the Renaissance. Renaissance is rightly regarded as a chief force in the making of modern European literature. Young Englishmen visited Italy to learn and brought back inspiration. The new learning was established in Oxford and Cambridge by the help of the introduction of the printing press in 1476 by William Caxton, the first English printer who set up his press at Westminster. Then last one, the literature of early Renaissance. The results of the learning of revival was first shown in the early Tudor period. In prose, William Tyndale's English New Testament, Miles Coverdale's The Complete Bible and Cromwell's The Great Bible shows the popular interest on scripture, and this paves the way to the development of a standard prose and also to Reformation. The Utopia of Sir Thomas More that describes of an ideal society, which is one of the typical works of this period. Till 1551, this work was not entered into English literature, but only after the translation by Ralph Robinson, it was entered into English literature. Then Roger Ascham, he is one of the earliest masters of original English prose, and he wrote Tottel'S or School of Shooting and an education treatise, that is the Schoolmaster, which was published 2 years after his death. In poetry, there was a direct influence of Italy. Stephen Hawes and John Skelton began by imitating Chaucer, but the new movement began at the court of Henry VIII. Sir Thomas Ward and Henry Howard, that is Earl of Surrey, were filled with new culture and greatly polished the new poetry. Also, they brought the love poetry from Italy, and it was called a sonnet. Surrey was the first to use blank verse. Ward and Surrey are the chief poets represented in a collection of songs and sonnets, which is commonly known as Tottel'S Miscellany. So thus English literature distinctly marks the dawn of the new age.